Welcome and thank you for joining us today for From Adversaries to Allies, Bridge the NetOps-SecOps Gap with Network Observability. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be moderating today's event. Our featured speakers are Shamus McGillicuddy, VP of Research covering Network Infrastructure and Operations at EMA, and Daniel Smallwood, Software Senior Sales Engineer at LiveAction Software. Shamus has nearly 2 decades of experience in the IT industry. His research focuses on all aspects of managing enterprise networks, including network automation, AIOps-driven network operations, multi-cloud networking, and WAN transformation. For over 20 years, Daniel has been a dedicated and versatile security engineer with a background in systems engineering, information security, IT, and operations. And before I hand things over to today's featured speakers, I want the audience to know that Shamus and Daniel will be concluding today's presentation by taking your questions. Feel free to log them anytime by using the Q&A functionality. Also, today's event is being recorded and you will receive a follow-up email from EMA that will include the on-demand playback as well as additional resources. So I hope you will check that email out. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to today's first featured speaker, Shamus McGillicuddy. Shamus?
Thank you, Raleigh, and thank you, Daniel, for joining us today for this webinar. So I'm going to just talk about some things that I've been seeing in the industry and some research that I've done recently, looking at partnerships that we're seeing or collaboration that we're seeing between the Network Infrastructure and Operations group and the cybersecurity or IT security or information security group. The title of this webinar talks about how they're going from adversaries to something else. Why are they adversarial historically, and why is that changing? Is it changing? Our research shows that these groups, these factions in your digital organization are expanding their partnerships for a variety of reasons. So first off, we see that, and I use the shorthand of NetSecOps to describe that partnership or that collaboration. Some other thought leaders have attempted to coin NetSecOps as some sort of like DevOps alignment, applying DevOps principles to network infrastructure and operations and security operations at the same time. I don't go for that. I think that's just stretching the DevOps nomenclature too far. I think of NetSecOps as a collaboration movement between two traditional technology groups within a digital organization of an enterprise. And what we see in terms of that is that over the last 6 years, those two functions within an organization, there might be functions spread over different groups within an organization, like there might be a couple teams involved in networking and 2 or 3 teams involved in security. Whatever the case is, the level of collaboration between those groups is increasing. From in 2020, 2021, and 2023, or actually 2024, sorry, that's a typo. We asked these hundreds of IT decision makers over the last couple of years, have you seen the amount of collaboration between these functions in your organization increase? And the number of people who are saying it's significantly increased is growing from survey to survey, from 29% 5 years ago to 36% last year. We're also seeing some realignment of organizations. Like on the right-hand side, this pie chart asks them, is the result of a question like how are you organized around networking security internally? And 51% said we have siloed teams, which is traditional. Almost 36% said recently we have fully converged these groups. That's pretty radical. One group doing networking and security. And then a little less than 14% said recently we partially converged our groups, meaning like they haven't like brought the groups together, but maybe have like a a board of networking and security people making strategic decisions, or special projects groups that are working on things like, oh, we've converged a team to work on secure access service edge, for instance, because it's a unified platform for networking security, or we're building guardrails in the cloud, and networking and security working together on that. Before I go any further, I wanted to pause for a poll question here. Like, over the last 2 years, have you seen an increase in your organization or a reduction in your organization in terms of collaboration between your organization's networking and security teams? So you have 3 options here: increased collaboration, reduced collaboration, no change. So I'll give you a few seconds to answer that. Okay, so a third of you have seen an increase, and 2/3 of you report no change. Okay. So moving on. Why are these teams coming together? So on the left, we have technologies and initiatives that an enterprise is engaged with that are responsible for or driving that collaboration. And you see 40% said, well, we're trying to implement more IT or network automation, and a lot of that automation impacts security, like, oh, like firewall automation, or just like implementing policy, like security policies and infrastructure through automation. Or 31% said hybrid cloud, and I mentioned guardrails in a cloud environment. You know, a couple of years ago, I was talking to a network engineer whose the bank he worked for was going into the cloud at the time for the first time. And he mentioned how he and his group and the security group were laying a foundation for that by building these guardrails for what the cloud group could and couldn't do in the cloud, and how they should build infrastructure. So hybrid cloud and multi-cloud plays a role in that. 28% said multi-cloud architecture is a driver of that. And I mentioned secure access service edge, which is a convergence of software-defined WAN overlays with cloud-delivered security capabilities. And quite often, that is a convergence of 2 sets of technologies that are traditionally owned by 2 different distinct groups. Like the network engineers and architects are designing, building, and managing SD-WAN, and the security group would be implementing a lot of security controls that live in SASE points of presence, or SASE clouds, or SASE proxies. And now that's all converging into a unified platform. And so they necessarily have to collaborate on that. We also asked in our research last year, are there business issues or events that encourage collaboration between these 2 groups? The #1 response was labor issues or skills gaps, sort of force multiplying by bringing 2 groups together that have complementary and some overlapping skills and knowledge and capability to tackle projects and problems together, to close those gaps. Like especially like a security group. In my, I talk to a lot of network engineering and operations professionals who often talk about how they have a cybersecurity organization that isn't really knowledgeable about networks. They tend to be more knowledgeable about hosts and protections oriented towards hosts and understanding what's going on with hosts. And to the extent that they understand networking, they often look to the network team to help them and understand, like, okay, so what are you seeing in terms of traffic? Can you analyze the traffic and see if there are any indicators of compromise or threat? So that's another example of how, like, a cybersecurity team that's very host-centric might lack the networking skills or networking knowledge that would help them understand network-based attacks or indicators of network activity that would be an indicator of a threat or attack. Other drivers in terms of issues and events: new regulatory requirements. We've got some data sovereignty issues to iron out. We need to think more about how we monitor traffic coming, or monitoring the movement of data in and out of different parts of our network. We've got to rethink how we consume the cloud or cloud-based services in terms of data sovereignty, things like that. Recent cybersecurity incidents, we've been attacked, we've been compromised. Networking and security now have a mandate to work together to make sure that doesn't happen again. They might be implementing a zero trust architecture, for instance, that relies on a lot of network technology. So the security team might specify zero trust strategy. Network team might come and say, here are the technologies that we can bring to help support that. And then budget challenges. Network people often tell me they look at the security team as like a source of budget for things that they think they can justify as a security requirement. Like, oh yeah, you know, if we get the security team to help us with observability investments, that would be improve our capabilities, but we could also select something that addresses some of their needs as well around like something like network detection and response, like a solution that does NDR and performance monitoring and management, you know, would be very helpful. One of the things that we hear in conversations and in the research we did recently is that security teams need network data, and that need for network data drives collaboration. 96% of the people in our survey that we published last year say that the security team's need to analyze network data is driving collaboration. And this data-driven convergence was much more perceived, much more obvious to the subject matter experts in the trenches, the network, the infrastructure engineers, the security analysts, the architects, the people that are really closest to the technology were more aware of this than people in like director positions and VPs and CIO, CTO, CISO roles. So it's something that's kind of driven from the bottom up, this need for data. And it might be something like, hey, can you show me all the traffic that passed between these two VLANs and provide me with some analysis of it? And the network team will say, sure, yeah, we captured that, or we didn't capture it, but we could capture it in the future if you want to help us upgrade our packet capture capabilities. On the flip side, people who tell us that this security's need for network data is a driver of collaboration, the ones that are saying that it's like it's a major, like a significant driver of collaboration, we're more likely to tell us that data quality is a challenge in collaboration. So that tells us that the networking teams and their ability to collect good data to the extent that the security team needs it can sometimes be challenged or stretched. So like, I remember having a conversation with a network engineer who's like, yeah, sometimes once the security team came to me and said, we want to see all traffic that crosses between any VLANs in the data center. And the network engineer is like, we don't have that capacity and you don't want it because that would be more data than you could analyze. But also like there's the demand for data can stretch the network team's ability to deliver all the good data. It can reveal that they have data quality issues. Like, oh, I thought that we had a DNS infrastructure that was good at exporting logs and queries to a SIM, but actually we're seeing some gaps there because actually we have like 20 different DNS providers, some of which we weren't aware of until we asked the cloud about it. And those are not very good at streaming logs and queries to the SIM. Like the one that we have is good, but we're finding some gaps there. That can happen. Network data is also a bigger driver of an organization has experienced a cybersecurity incident recently and citing that as a driver of their collaboration. So security incident occurred, the networking and security teams start working together, and now they're starting to see like, we need to really work hard on making sure that we can deliver the data that the security team needs to understand what's happening on the network from a security perspective. Packets are a particular focus. I've already kind of mentioned like traffic between VLANs a couple times. We asked them, how valuable is it for your security team to have access to full packet data associated with the traffic that traverses your network? And you see that overall, like more than, almost 39% said it was very valuable, but another 49-ish% said it's at least somewhat valuable. So it's almost at all the enterprises we surveyed see some value at least in providing full packet data associated with traffic to the security team as a network team. And network engineering and cybersecurity teams are more likely to see the importance of packets than other groups that were in our research, like IT architecture, project management, network operations, which is mostly like people in like tier 1 roles. The network engineering team and more than SecOps as well. So like the NetOps team, the SecOps team, the tier 1 responders and the people who are further away from like analysis and tier 2, tier 3 actions in networking and security were less likely to see the importance of packets. But those tier 3 network engineers and those tier 3 cybersecurity people who are doing the deep analysis of events, doing incident response, like solving the complex problems from a performance and availability perspective and a security perspective, were more likely to say, yeah, packets are essential. We also asked them, what use cases are they fulfilling for you in a collaboration perspective, these packets? And number 1 was investigating alerts from endpoint security tools. Secondarily, investigating alerts from network security tools and alerts from SIEM, SOAR, XDR platforms. So it's all about like the security team seeing something in one of their tools and saying, hey, we need to dive into packets. We've got the metadata or summary data in our tools, but now we got to dive into the packets for forensic analysis. You see some tertiary use cases as well, like investigating data exfiltration, which was more common in network operations centers, people who work in network operations centers, and also in the mid-market, and investigating indicators of compromise, like seeing some activity in user behavior or traffic patterns and saying, let's dive into packets associated with that. So next, one key area of the research that I've been mentioning here is around network observability and how it enables collaboration. 89% of the network teams that or the IT decision makers that we surveyed said that the network team's observability solutions provide security insights that can be, anomalies in traffic. It could be something more mundane, like, hey, we're collecting SNMP metrics and events from like our firewalls and providing that to the security team because they want to understand whether the firewalls are passing are healthy, passing traffic or dropping traffic unnecessarily. Are they functioning as meant to? But there are some network observability solutions that do much more than just anomaly detection and telling you whether your network security infrastructure is healthy or not. We asked these people, like, do you think that the security insights you get from your network observability tools, the tools that you typically use to manage performance and troubleshoot and optimize your networks, do the security insights that those tools deliver, are they valuable? And you see here, like almost 91% said they're at least somewhat valuable. So if you have a network observability solution that can provide security insights, chances are you're going to find some value in it in some way. We also found that tools that the recognition that tools offer valuable security insights also correlate with successful collaboration between networking and security groups. So that tells you that if you have a network observability tool that provides security insights, chances are when you're trying to partner with your counterparts across in the other silo, things are going to go better because you have tools that can facilitate that partnership and create some value for them and teach them that you can help them when they need it. We did see one warning sign, which is that IT middle management executives perceive more value from the security insights of a network observability tool than the SMEs, like the network engineers, architects, and security analysts, like those people that are closer to the technology were softer on the value. So some of this might be driven by a gap between people who are in the trenches and people who are making management decisions. So there needs to be some discussion there around how to make sure that these security insights are delivering value to the people that are using them the most. And in terms of security insights coming out of NetOps tools, the biggest one that was of interest was just network detection and response, like being able to see patterns of behavior, applying some analytics and AI to that to sort of diagnose what might be going on from a security perspective. And I noted also number 2 here, health and performance reporting on network security infrastructure is an important security insight for a lot of people. Also, correlations of performance issues with indicators of compromise is another big one. In other research I've done over the years, we often ask network operations professionals to tell us what the root cause was of the last 2 incidents that drove a war room response, like in terms of like network incidents and like network performance issues. What was the last 2 network performance issues that drove a war room response, like what ended up being the root cause of that? And one of the top responses was a security incident. So what that tells you is that a lot of times a network operations team is responding to something that has been reported to them or alerted to them as a performance or availability issue impacting user experience, application performance. And then as they dive into it, it reveals itself as a security incident. So being able to correlate performance issues with indicators of compromise can really shorten that mean time to insight there and make sure that a network team can actively help a security team zero in on security issues more quickly rather than spending a lot of time like troubleshooting it as a performance issue. We also see a lot of interest around tertiary interest around inventory assessments and forensic analysis of incidents. Inventory assessments, like if you have a network observability tool that can like reveal like the latest CVEs and whether or not you need to when you should be addressing them, for instance, things like that can be really helpful. So going beyond the concept of a network observability tool that provides security insights to a network observability tool that can be shared across network and security teams. This is something that, has been a topic of conversation ever since several network observability vendors started offering like network-based security monitoring and analysis tools like network detection and response. There is the possibility that a tool that does both performance management and network detection and response could be shared from a user perspective, from a budget perspective, and could offer some value. So we asked people in our most recent research if your network and security personnel adopted a shared tool for network performance monitoring and network security monitoring, do you think such a tool would be valuable? And 88-ish%, almost 88% said that it was at least somewhat valuable as a concept to have a shared tool like that. 41% said it would be very valuable. I mean, that's a lot of enthusiasm, 41% of the people we surveyed. The perceived value is higher when the collaboration that's going on between these people is driven by a couple of technologies I've already mentioned before: secure access service edge and public cloud, especially multi-cloud. that's where they really see the need for it. Like when they're adopting these hybrid infrastructures, these SASE overlays that are building and like establishing tunnels over their WAN underlay, and a public cloud environment where they have much less control and visibility than they used to before. That's where they really start to see the need for a shared monitoring tool. So I'm going to ask another poll question here. Is the organization interested in adopting a shared tool for use by both your networking team and security team, a network monitoring tool? Yes or no, or you already have one in place? Let's give you a few seconds to answer that one. Okay, so wow, all right. So 75% said we already have one, 25% said yes. So no one is not interested. That's cool. But interest doesn't always lead to doing it, right? Like, but here are some of the potential benefits or impacts of a shared observability tool. So we asked people, what do you think would play out if you like, how would it play out if you adopted a shared tool? Like, how would it help you? 42% said, oh, it would be acceleration in response problem resolution. I already talked about how like a lot of NetOps teams often troubleshoot an issue as a performance problem and then find out it's a security problem. If you're using the same tool the security team is using, it's going to have a depth of insight that's going to probably most of the time say, hey, don't even think about it as a performance issue. It's clearly a DDoS attack, or it's clearly a breach or an attack of some kind. Like, let's work on this together. Like, what can the network team do to resolve this, and what can the security team do to resolve this? And you get it done faster. You recognize the problem quicker and take care of it. 40% said it would allow us to cover more of our network. So like, if you're using one tool across networking and security, like you'd probably be able to pour more resources into it and cover more of your network. Like, you'd probably be able to buy a higher license tier that allow you to just collect data from more places at higher volumes, and have fewer blind spots, for instance. Cost efficiency, obviously, like if you're using one tool, less expensive than two. I don't know if actually a lot of people would get rid of their old tools. And also, I mean, when I survey network operations people, like they usually have 3 to 11 tools for network observability. And so like consolidation is always a challenge, but yes, if both groups are like, oh, it's time for us to invest in a new monitoring tool, if they pull the resources on one, chances are it would be less expensive than buying 2 net new tools, for instance. 36% also said it allows us to be more proactive with problem detection. Like, we're actually detecting performance and security issues before it starts impacting the business. It also would optimize data management if there's just one place for data related to monitoring as opposed to 2. There's not a lot of time spent correlating data across 2 tools if we just have one. It's easier to store that data once rather than twice. Like, if you have 2 tools that are doing like packet monitoring, one that's a security solution, one's a performance solution, that's like a lot of storage for 2 tools that could be consolidated into one, for instance. Like the packets just live in, or the packet metadata just lives in one place. And then collaboration enablement, like, which kind of ties into the faster response, but like it just facilitates, like, if you're both like fluent in the same tool, like it's easier for you to sort of like share dashboards or like get on a Zoom call and like and talk to someone and say, you're in the tool, you're in our shared tool as well, right? Yep. Okay. So let's look at this. Yeah. You see what I see? Yeah, I see that. Yeah. It's just easier to partner up. Collaboration enablement has more value when, I mean, when the network and security teams are siloed. So that's another key piece, is like that 32% that said collaboration enablement is a big value of a shared tool. If those two teams are siloed, the network team and the security team are siloed, that potential value went up in our data. Like, oh yes, we haven't unified our groups, but the shared tool makes it easier for us to work together across silos. We also saw that successful network operation and successful collaborators tended to tell us that it's the better data management opportunity is a big win. Like we have one place where the data lives, the quality is higher, there's less time spent on making sure the data is good, there's less money spent on storing the data because it's one data lake, and it's, so that's a potential best practice, given the fact that that one correlates with successful collaborators more. But there are barriers. 92% of the people we surveyed said that they do see things that would keep them from sharing observability tools. The number one response was security risk. Like, for instance, the security team thinks that there'll be like insights or data in the tool that they don't want network operations or network engineering to see or have access to, for instance. Maybe they don't trust like tier 1 responders to have access to the tool, for instance. In the NOC. They see like training requirements might be an issue. Like it might take time especially if it's a tool that's shared but is preferred by one group, the other group will have a knowledge gap that needs to be closed. Conflicts over budget and shared costs makes sense. Access control complexity kind of plays into the security risk piece a little bit. Contention over usage or access. Especially if you run into like licensing limits with how many people can be logged into the tool, that comes up with some vendors. And then cultural resistance and conflicts over tool and strategy kind of are tertiary concerns. There is a perception gap about challenges. IT executives and middle management didn't really think that there were any barriers. Well, a significant number of them, 16% of IT executives, 17% of managers, supervisors, directors said, I don't see any barriers to this, but only 2% of the engineers, architects, analysts reported no barriers. So that tells you that like in the trenches, those people are like more concerned about bringing these people together on a shared tool. All right, so last thing before I hand things over to Daniel for his perspective from LiveAction, just outcomes and best practices of these partnerships. Only 45% of the people in our research reported that this collaboration is completely successful, which is a pretty decent number, but so more than half want to see some improvement in how these groups work together. And these are the overall challenges that they're dealing with. Data quality and budget issues are the two big ones. Those are two things, incidentally, that kind of showed as potential benefits of a shared observability tool. Like there's some cost optimization opportunities there, and also some improvement around data management. So just pointing that out. And then architectural complexity, skills gaps, cultural resistance, these people working together. These all make sense. You probably see some of these in your experience. The benefits, like we asked people, what happens when your networking and security groups work together well? Number one response was reduced security risk. Makes sense based on everything I'm talking about, like faster insights, better network coverage, things like that. Like reduced security risk is a big one, but also operational efficiency. People just work more efficiently. They get fewer person hours spent on things when these groups are working together. Faster resolution of network and application trouble. So it's not just benefiting the security group, like the NetOps and network engineering teams are also going to see their goals addressed as well, like faster resolution of the things that can impact your goal to deliver a highly performing and highly available network. And then faster detection and resolution of security issues when they still occur despite reduced risk, and cost savings and improved network resilience. So downtime is minimized. So best practices. This is my final slide in case you're sick of hearing me talk. So We saw that when executives are taking specific steps, like CIOs and CISOs are taking specific steps to make these people work together better, that collaboration improves. Specifically, if the CIOs and CISOs are driving formalized best practices, like here are the best practices, here are the procedures that we want you to follow to work together. Also consolidating middle management. I've often talked to people who tell me that like one of the barriers they see to these groups working together is like directors who are like territorial and are like, I'm not letting my team work with that team because I don't like their director, or that, there's like attempts to hold on to power. So consolidating middle management, like having the two groups report into like a more unified structure might help. And then expanding budgets, giving these people the money they need to do the training, to buy the technology they need to facilitate the partnerships. We found that like people who are fully siloed or people who are fully unified are more likely to be successful than those who are just like partially unified. Like we're going to form a team to just work on this project or that project, but otherwise we're going to stay separated. The fully siloed and fully converged are both good. Like you can make both work. We also saw that like people who have really good traffic level visibility in the cloud, like can get access to packets in the cloud, are also working together better. So keep that in mind, especially given the fact that cloud is one of the drivers of this collaboration. A focus on optimizing data management across network and security teams, which has come up a few times already, is also associated with success. And then finally, people who told us that they have network observability tools that can provide full packet visibility into network traffic traversing your network, strong security insights from those network observability tools, and application layer intelligence, both in terms of application performance and application security, were better capable of supporting this collaboration. So those are the best practices we saw in the research. And now, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our friend from LiveAction here.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Shamus. So we have about 22 minutes left. And what I intend to do here is share 3 stories that I have from my operational background. So I'm Daniel Smallwood. I work in the sales side of LiveAction, now Blue Cat. But a lot of my background is operational. I've worked in various sizes of organizations, sizes relative, but on the smallest end, I'd call it a large, extra large, and colossal. These are the sizes of organizations I've worked with in NetOps, but mostly in the security team. And I've seen these interactions both on the good side and the bad side as far as collaborating and not collaborating. Sometimes these teams are downright adversarial against each other. They tend to point the finger at each other, but when it works, when they work together, really interesting things can happen. I've got a lot of stories aligned with that. I'm going to share 3 today. The first one is a story where NetOps helped SecOps. The second one is where NetOps and SecOps worked together on the same problem they didn't even realize they had until they butted heads looking at the same network segment. And the last one that we'll get to is where security ops helped the NetOps team in that direction. I've got a bunch more beyond that. So if you have any questions about what you're hearing from Shamus or from me today, start chewing on that and thinking about that. I think we'll have enough time for some Q&A at the end. But on to our first story. This has to do with DNS attribution. And I don't want to get too technical or in the weeds, but DNS is a major component of every network operation, right? DNS is what translates host names into IP addresses, and the other way around sometimes too. Every single network service in use today leverages DNS to work. If DNS doesn't work, your whole network doesn't work. Also, because it's so useful and valuable, it's a great place to look for security insights as well. So this story starts from a DNS attribution, and the DNS attribution challenge, what this is talking about is the way DNS works in an organization is if you ask a DNS server to resolve a host name into an IP address, and it doesn't know the answer right away, it asks on your behalf. That's a process called DNS recursion. That ask on your behalf works all the way up the chain. When you see that coming through a network perimeter, that might look like an indicator of compromise, but you have no way of attributing which host asked the question. It's called the who is question, right? Who did this problem? Who requested this DNS resource? I have a little bit, I want to make sure I don't miss any of the story. So when a request is made, it often follows this recursive path. And this makes DNS fast and distributed, but it also creates that problem I mentioned where suspicious DNS activity, we can't attribute it. And also DNS is caching, something I didn't mention either. So maybe we can attribute the first request, but any other infected host that might have asked that same question gets blinded to the security team by the fact that DNS is caching the result. So we can't tell who else might be affected by the same problem. So in this case, for this story, the necessary DNS data resided on the Active Directory server. Active Directory servers can be provisioned to do many different things. DNS service is one of the things that they can do. So we need to engage with the NetOps team. However, these systems are critical, and making changes to them comes with a significant amount of operational risk. If you make a change to an Active Directory component, you could effectively turn off the network, and nobody wants to be responsible for taking down Active Directory. I was at the time on the security team. We worked with the network team to derive and get this data out. This DNS logs is what we needed so that we could finish the attribution. And we worked together and we devised a secure way to configure DNS logging without it affecting operations. We monitored that very closely to make sure we weren't impacting that. And the results were amazing. So suddenly we had the indicator of compromise problem that we were seeking to solve got solved instantly, right? So whenever we saw, if someone went to hacker.com as a good example of a bad domain, we could immediately tell who did it and who else in the network did it for long periods of time. Sometimes security teams will let you know that security intelligence, so some of the security intelligence that you gather in the security team are things like indicators of compromise around hostile domain names. These always are old. They might only be a couple hours old, maybe they're a couple days old, but they're always old, which means you need historical perspective. It's not just about, well, if anyone in the future goes to this domain, we'll know about it. No, we need to know, did anyone go yesterday or last week, et cetera. Collecting this data was really essential, but it didn't help just the security team. So it's not just about security. It made the network more resilient. Rogue hosts could be identified and corrected. So a rogue host is a host that's not obeying the security policy of DNS, or a host that's not configured correctly to use DNS suffix search orders and these kind of things. By collecting this data, we didn't just solve our first problem with that DNS attribution. We discovered all kinds of operational problems that we passed back willingly to the networks team to allow them to react to it and get the network in a better place. So that's the first story. And remember, this is NetOps helping us, the security team at the time. I was on the security team, helping us with the data we needed, and then we shared gladly back and made the network a safer place. Okay, let's go to the next story, the next slide. So it's maybe the oldest story I have. And in fact, thinking about it today, I don't think this would happen in today's environment, but it's not impossible. It gets a little technical, so please bear with me. This is when I was part of a colossal security organization looking at a government network around the world. It encompassed every time zone, just about. And the problem we had was with a security indicator at the network perimeter. At one of the networks there in the world. Let me make sure I don't want to miss key elements of the story. So excuse me while I look at my notes real quick. So it happened in the early 2000s when I was first getting my feet wet into the network security realm. And the security team, we were seeing indications of probing unlike anything else that we've seen. So if you have a global view of network activity, you can actually watch actors as they probe the entire IP space. We could predict when this potential maybe hostile actor was probing this network over here, and we knew we could almost calculate when he was going to touch the next network because he was crawling the entire IP space from left to right around the world. So we would watch these things happen in this organization, and we'd be able to predict when things were going, and we document them and those kind of things. This was happening only at this network, which any kind of one-off is going to raise your attention as a security operator, right? This was looking at ports 85 and 170. Nobody, if you have any technical acumen, you might not even recognize those ports. We certainly didn't. Why were these ports being probed constantly at this network edge? We reached out to the network team there at this particular location, and they said that they, at that same place, were seeing performance issues. So what we did is, since we had a security device listening all the traffic, it had full packet capture capability, and we sampled out some of the packets there to gain insight of what's happening at this organization. And what we saw was a series of these characters that looked highly suspicious at first, but when we passed the data back to the network team, one of the network engineers there instantly recognized that what we were seeing was a jamming signal. And a jamming signal occurs when a network device is communicating on the wire and then hears that someone else is communicating too. That network device is going to send out a jamming signal to let them know we're both talking at the same time and we can't do it. This is why this might not happen in modern networks where they're switched and full duplex. This is back when we were sharing one cable to communicate with each other. This revealed a segment size too large. And this is fun for me because to this day, when someone asks, how big was that packet? I always react in, what do you want? Feet, meters? Like packets have a length. A packet, actually, if you use the speed of light and how fast that signal is going, you can determine the length of the packet in feet. And if your segment, your network cable, is longer than the size of that packet, you're going to run into problems where jamming happens all the time and collisions happen more frequently than not. So after discovering the solution to that was they needed to shorten that cable. The solution was physically altering the network by making the cable shorter. They could have also introduced another router in there to make one long segment into two shorter segments. They fixed the problem. And it's just a perfect example of security team, network team. We both see a problem in an area and we work together. Our tools came together to solve that problem. They were so relieved because they didn't know where to begin with dealing with that packet trouble. Okay, let's get to the last story. I want to make sure we have time for questions. This is a fun one. So this is about a VIP lockout account. And this has to do with a high profile user that kept getting locked out of their Active Directory account. They'd get a new password, everything would work fine for a while, and then they'd get locked out again. And this cycle repeated for weeks. The NetOps team could not track down where the failed login attempts must have been coming from, because that's what perceivably was causing them to be locked out, as they were attempting the wrong password over and over. So they reached out to the security team, because that sounds like maybe a security issue, right? When you get people getting locked out. So we couldn't determine that either, which is it's a great when you identify these holes in your visibility, you don't hide in your shell. You go and say, hey, this is a problem. We need to fix the problem. So we built out tooling to gather all the evidence from our endpoints. We had about 5,000 Windows workstations. This was maybe the smallest organization I worked for. We had 5,000 Windows endpoints. And we realized what we could do is to determine who's logging in as this person or attempting to. There's a file left behind in Windows that we could retrieve to at least give us evidence of who's trying to log in as this person. Through doing that, we found a laptop in a conference room sitting all by itself. We physically walked to the conference room and the conference room was empty. And in the corner was this laptop. On that laptop, that VIP had logged into it with their first set of credentials, and it had Outlook open. And even though that laptop wasn't going to sleep, which was another problem too, but every time that laptop would try to get new emails over Outlook, it would attempt an old credential to do that and would lock out their account every X number of minutes, right? So the learning point here was, first of all, the network team, they screamed, we knew it. It wasn't us. It was this VIP that was blaming us for causing all the problems, but it was really their laptop that they abandoned in the conference room and didn't log out correctly that caused the problems. But really, it pointed to another problem with our visibility, a gap in our visibility. We, the security team, had no idea who was trying to log in and failing in different places. So it's a gap that we closed by building out tooling and sharing that with the net team. And by doing that too, we were able to discover all kinds of interesting things that we could share with the NetOps team regarding rogue hosts, right? Hosts that aren't logging into Active Directory, but are still alive on the network. All kinds of interesting, valuable things that I call it shrink wrapping the network. We started to shrink wrap the network. Every network's kind of a snowflake. You can deploy similar tools, but there's always this process of feedback where you learn something, discover a gap, discover something like that, apply it so it doesn't happen in the future. Every time you get a little bit smarter, which you can only do with real good data, every time you get a little bit smarter, you shrink wrap your control over that network. There's a couple other things I wanted to mention. So that's the last slide and the last story I had. I have a bunch more in my quiver. Maybe we can do a follow-up if you want to hear some more of those. But I wanted to mention a couple other things that I was reminded as Shamus was talking, and it has to do with data quality. Data quality. So the network team and the security team, they can both use a lot of the data to solve their problems with visibility. They just need it for different reasons. And one of those different reasons kind of highlights itself. If anyone's dealt with flow data before, not all flow data is the same. There's this something called S-flow, which is sampled flow data. Sampled flow data produces flow data on a router of 1 out of n number of packets, which is perfect for network ops, but not so good for security ops because we need to be confident that we saw every single communication that occurred, and that these bad guys, and I've been part of these investigations, they'll hide in a single packet sometimes. So we need to know and have confidence that we saw it all. So data quality is important as you're talking about. Is it enough that S-flow would be good for you, security team? If not, solve that problem. And the other one was with PCAP. PCAP is super valuable only when it's all inclusive. So don't for the security team anyway, don't exclude out port 443 traffic. This is SSL, it's encrypted. Why would you need to capture that? I'm telling you, we need to capture every single packet, and a rolling buffer is the best value you can provide. And it needs to be super fast. If you make packet data available really quickly, without friction, without walking a laptop somewhere, setting up a span port, hooking it in, starting the recording, hoping the problem exists again, that's way too much friction. If you can be a couple mouse clicks away from PCAP, it's a paradigm shifting moment for the security team and the network teams. And what that paradigm shift really means is, and the way you know paradigm shift has occurred with this is when they, it doesn't change how fast they operate, it changes the questions they ask of that data. And it's a lot of fun to be a part of that. That's it for my stories. I really appreciate the time. When I heard this webinar was coming up, I couldn't wait to participate and share some of the real world stories that I've experienced in my operational background, and anxious to see if there's any questions. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for those great stories, Daniel. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Starting with you, Daniel, data sharing between NetOps and SecOps can be a sensitive issue, especially with production systems like Active Directory. How do you recommend balancing security risks while still enabling valuable visibility?
It's a great question. It's right in line with that that first story about getting access to those Active Directory servers. There's something else that could have occurred in that. So I'll get to your question, the answer to your question in a second. But one of the things that we might have done differently then was to say, can we factor out the DNS role of these Active Directory servers such that we can have more control over it and get better logging without risking taking down the entire Windows domain? Can we factor that out? At the time, we didn't do that. We just had to solve the problem that we had before us. And the way we kind of dealt with that was twofold. First of all, we wrote it in the security policy of how we would interact with it, who would have access to it. So one of the questions, if you ever have these teams interacting, ask to see the security policy. And if they fidget a little bit, it might be that they don't have one, and that's okay. That's maybe step one. Let's get a security policy in place where we describe who has access where, and make sure you have good auditing so that when someone says, hey, the Active Directory server went down overnight, we want to blame the security team for something that they did. Make sure auditing is turned on so you can know who logged in when. Security doesn't just have to do with the people outside the security team. You have to monitor every action and movement of the security team too. So those audit logs become super valuable to help give confidence to everybody that if something changes on the network, we're going to know where it happened and when. That's my advice.
Good insights. Thanks, Daniel. The next question I'll throw out there and get both of your feedback. It is, what are the best angles for a boots on the ground security tech to persuade management to collaborate more with NetOps? I see the value, but may not get the buy-in because of perceived risks. What advice do you two have?
So I think one place to start would be like the recognition that the platforms that a digital enterprise runs on are converging. That starts with the wide area network, for instance. You're seeing a lot of adoption of secure access service edge. That is a convergence of technology owned by network engineering operations and technology owned by cybersecurity. I'm seeing a lot of enterprises that are doing like two vendor solutions where the network team and the security team are trying to integrate their chosen platforms. I don't know if that's going to last. I think a unified approach to that is especially important because of a lot of SASE proxies that are delivered in the cloud are becoming blind spots for the network team, and they're having trouble delivering good user experience. So if you have a network and security team that are working together on transformation of infrastructure like that, you're less likely to have those blind spots. You're seeing in the data center too, with AI taking on a lot of hype right now, where the network team is really focused on making sure that their data center network fabric is very low latency, lossless, and high throughput. But there still needs to be network security in place, or security services that cybersecurity might be responsible for implementing. And those security teams are going to need to work very closely with the network team to make sure that security controls don't implement or impose a lot of latency. There are architectural decisions that need to be made. A SecOps person can say specifically the things we need to do to protect our AI project will possibly lead to AI failure unless we're working very closely with the network team. So those are a couple of examples.
Yeah, I'll just chip in. Anytime there's any kind of risk in a network, whether that's bringing on a security tool, it could be a risk, right? That someone could identify. You need to make sure that you're measuring the right stuff in order to mitigate that risk. The risk could be, like Shamus mentioned, a performance impact, right? So are you measuring the right place so that you can see the impact both before and after and during, right? And other risks can be, data spills or collecting sensitive data in places where you need to keep it secure and encrypted, either in transit or at rest. There's things you need to measure as well. So there's a lot of security tools out there to help you identify and confirm, yes, this traffic is encrypted or not, and actually inspect it to see if it shouldn't be. So that conversation of let's identify the risk and make sure we don't just close our ears, but think about how we would mitigate any risks in our existing infrastructure and any new tools. It's important to know that term, measure what matters, is important. Let's start measuring so that we can see the impact of these things.
Great. Thank you both for those insights. That brings us to the conclusion of our webinar. I wanted to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us today. As I mentioned, you will be receiving a follow-up email from EMA that will have resources from today's event, so be sure to check that email out. Thanks again for joining us, and I hope to see you at a future EMA research webinar.